So Kara, Rev, the check is in the mail. I want to thank you for all the work that you do for all of us. And on behalf of my parents, I just want to say thank you all for the honor to be here and the honor to speak to you. Thank you.
Some of you forget where you come from and forget how you got there and act like you got there because you were qualified or that you had a good resume. But some of us had to pay a price for your resume to even be read. Some of us had to take nights in jails and licks upside the head or shut out of boardrooms like Byron so you could walk down red carpets and act like you got there by yourself. So I received this award with a special, special place in my heart and on my shelf because I'm getting it from a freedom fighter who never forgot where he came from and how he got there. Yes, we've come a long way. We've had now a black president and now a black vice president. But we still can get shot down and have to march to get a case in court. We still can get shut out of boardrooms. We're still doubly unemployed in a good economy. So we're gonna have to keep marching. And I thank not only my family, a mother that raised me by herself, but I thank that lady at the end of the march that knows she won't be on TV that night and knows her name will never be in the paper, but she believed in me enough to get at the end of the line and make me look good. Because Dr. King used to say, if you call a march and no one shows up, you're just going for a walk. And I want to thank those that marched with me. 32 years ago, here in Los Angeles, we marched. And then many years later, with George Floyd and others, we're still marching. And I'm gonna keep marching, I'm gonna keep agitating, and I'm gonna keep going. Until we don't have to do it anymore. Eddie, known you a long time, Mariah, Chris, and your kids. And I promise you this, the only thing that I really live for is I get up with this dream that every bigot, every racist, everyone in this country that hates will say, damn, he's up again.
So we just wanted to greet you all and thank you for allowing us in. Yes, sir. We was here.
They were on the plantation.
Our family was on the plantation. Wow. And that's, of course, that's the slave house. That's one of the slave houses.
Sir, it's been 13 years.
That's right.
Good to
How
see
you been?
Doing fine.
Right, last time. And we,
Alexander Sharpton. How many slaves were staying here?
I have no idea.
This is where they would have a slave.
Yeah, that's when exactly. That was exactly.
two people that most influenced my life are from South Carolina, James and Jesse. Jesse right up the road with me. I went over his mother's funeral. Jesse walked me to my mother's casket. From South Carolina. That's the balance of my life, James. Yeah. Civil rights, shoulders.
But also where your people from too.
Literally.
Yeah, right.
And when I knew Jesse was from James, I started Reverend.
Yeah.
And James had died before I knew about him in South Carolina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, James died December 25th. He died Christmas Day '06. And they came.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back President and Founder, Reverend Al Sharpton.
All right. I ran over to the women's luncheon, but I wanted to be back to do this because it's important we hear from people throughout the country that may run to lead the country. And we need to know and hear for ourselves. Before I bring on our next person who we're honored to have, when he came in, he brought me back a couple of weeks ago. And as you know, Reverend Jesse Jackson was my mentor. The last 4 or 5 conventions, he was here till he was too ill to be here and talked about how he had trained us. And he named our headquarters the House of Justice. And I thought about the one part that was missing in his services was that there was a man that stood with him when most of the establishment in New York would not stand with him. And he's a man that helped to raise and nurture me. Wouldn't be a NAN without him. And I'm glad he's here at the convention that he helped make possible. Give a hand, Bishop Herbert Daughtry. Bishop Herbert Daughtry. I was amazed at all these folks that loved Jesse, that we didn't even see them until, but Reverend Daughtry was there in Brooklyn. In fact, they had the meetings at House of Lord Church because the folk in Harlem didn't want Jesse in Harlem in '84. I'm telling you what I know. Karen Daughtry will tell you that I'm telling the truth. So I want to acknowledge him and say publicly we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. Our next guest, I never have seen anyone stand up stronger around the questions of deportation and stand up around vice than this governor, and gave not only respect to Reverend Jackson, but respect to the whole civil rights movement. And I wanted to have this conversation with him, and I'm so glad he facilitated being with us. He is the governor of the state of Illinois. And I don't have to read all his background. You know him, I know him. In fact, I saw a guy when I was at O'Hare Airport. He said, "I saw you with JB." I thought JB was James Brown. Now, Now it's J.B. Pritzker. Give it up, Governor J.B. Pritzker. It look like you brought your fan club with you.
It's my new name, James Brown Pritzker.
Let me start by asking you, you set a tone when they were doing the deportation ICE raids that I think resonated around the country. And give us what led you to taking such a defiant tone when it was not, at that time, politically polled that it would go either way. What were you thinking? Why did you do it?
Well, Reverend, it wasn't just about deportation, although that's what you heard when I stood up to him. But I want you to know that I've been standing up to him since, I got elected during his first term. And I must tell you, this is somebody you cannot trust. He lies consistently over and over and over again. So I knew when he got reelected that it was going to be bad. It was bad the first term, but you could see he was heading into a second term to really take away people's rights. And the first thing he did was go after, ICE, CBP invading my city. Before people saw it in Minneapolis, they did it in Chicago. We had people shot and killed by ICE and CBP. They were tackling black and brown people, U.S. citizens, and detaining people and taking them in. It wasn't really about deportation. It wasn't really about immigration. It's this whole administration's view about people of color. Evidence of that, I might add, is just look at his cabinet. He has one black person in the entire cabinet of the United States. 4 total out of 22 are people of color. One black person. I have to tell you, I knew early on, and I can tell you one other thing about him. In 2020, I'm going to just tell you this quick story. In 2020, I got elected in 2018, took office in 2019. I didn't talk to him for the first year, not because I didn't, have opportunities or didn't want to. It was just there wasn't anything that I needed to pick up the phone and call him about. By the way, every speech I gave when I ran for office was everything we care about is under siege by a racist, misogynist, homophobic, xenophobic president in Washington, D.C. So I don't think he much liked me from the beginning. But in 2020, I called him up at the beginning of COVID, very beginning of COVID, and I said, Mr. President, we need your help. We need 2 million N95 masks, and we need 4,000 ventilators. And we need them right away because I had people already in the hospital and dying before many other states. And he said, okay, we'll do that, but you've got to go on the Sunday shows and tell everybody that I did this for you and how much you like me. This is a national emergency. People are dying, and the president is essentially extorting. So I said, actually, he put Peter Navarro on the phone. You may remember him. He's still around. Went to prison, came back. He's in the Trump administration. Some others should still be going to prison, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, Peter Navarro got on the phone, and I said, hey, how fast can you get us this stuff? And he said, we can do it in Trump time. And of course, I was trying to get it, so I didn't want to be insulting. So I said, oh, that sounds very fast. How fast is that? And he said, well, we can get it to you by Sunday. So it was about 4 days. I said, that's terrific. That's great. What they sent was nothing of what I asked for. They sent me broken BiPAP machines, not ventilators. They sent me surgical masks, not N95 masks. There's a big difference. And so, I went on those Sunday shows, and I didn't say nice things about the president, as you can imagine. And look, the man has been a thorn in the side of working families across the United States, the most vulnerable people in the United States. And I'm just not going to let him do it to the people of Illinois. I said, when he took office again, I said, you come for my people, you come through me. So I've tried to stand up against him and for the people of Illinois every single day.
Tell us what led you, you've been successful in business, what led you into public service?
Thank you for asking that, because I think people overlook the fact that that I actually came from a family of people who had served the public interest. Let me start with, my family were refugees a few generations ago. And I've always felt like, and every generation of my family's felt like, we owe something to this country. My grandfather served in the Navy. My father, also a crypto analyst in the Navy. My uncle, my brother-in-law, my cousin, and we have a lot of people who've served in the military. My sister was the Commerce Secretary for Barack Obama, and I'm governor of the state of Illinois. And that impetus to be engaged in public service, I was also the chairman of the Human Rights Commission before I became governor. The impetus to be engaged in public service really comes from a belief in this country, a patriotism that I know the Republicans say Democrats aren't patriotic. We're the most patriotic. We believe in this country more than they do. They're tearing down the laws. They're operating in unconstitutional fashion. They elected somebody who is ruining our democracy. And so I think it's now more than ever, it's on all of us, I might add. It's on all of us to stand up for the future of our country, doing some public service. At a minimum, everybody has to go vote in this coming election.
You've said that affordability and economic empowerment go hand in hand. Tell us about your medical debt relief initiative and what it means for families.
So I think many of you know people, or you yourselves are suffering from some debt that you took on because you had a medical emergency, something you didn't expect. Maybe you were in a car accident or some other thing overtook you, a disease of some sort, right? And then when you're finally better, you're left with an enormous medical bill. And we have millions of people in the state of Illinois with medical debt that they can't pay and maybe never will pay. Probably will never pay. So we actually, starting with Cook County, the first county, Cook County, Illinois, the first county in the country to implement medical debt relief program. And then we took it statewide. And now we've eliminated $2 billion of people's medical debt. For 1 million people in the state of Illinois, we've eliminated their medical debt. And you don't have to do anything to get it either. You just get a letter in the mail. We do it without you asking. We just go and we buy the debt from the hospitals, from the collection agencies. We can often get it for 1 penny on the dollar. So we can get this done, and every state ought to be doing this. We were one of the very, very first states. We were the first county in the country to do it, and it really has made a difference. Think about how that weighs on your credit report and on your credit rating when you go to, rent an apartment or anything else in life and you need credit. And there you've got something sitting there. It wasn't your fault. It's the fault of a healthcare system that doesn't give people a doctor and give them healthcare that they can afford.
While you're on your programs, because I think this is stuff delegates from around the country can bring back to their governor, and we have several governors here, but tell me about your BUILD program. Your administration reported that black families are 8 times more likely to lose their homes, and your BUILD initiative has focused on new construction, but buildings take years, so beyond cutting red tape for developers, what's your plan to provide a direct and immediate help for black families being priced out or living in unsafe conditions?
So I want to say there are 3 important pieces of, if you want to address the housing crisis in this country, there are 3 important pieces that have to be addressed. It used to be we only talked about 2 of them. but we got to talk about all three, and here's what they are. I think we all know that there are far too many unhoused people in this country. And we actually put an initiative together, Home Illinois, that is tackling this problem statewide. And it's an initiative that we've got city by city by city. People are adopting the program that we put forward. And we put $250 million into that program to make sure that we're providing people with flexible housing or with initial housing so that they can move into something more permanent or into permanent housing. So that's dealing with the unhoused. That's 1/3 of the problem, or one piece of the problem. A second piece of the problem is what everybody calls affordable housing. And that, of course, is housing that the federal government has been the most involved in for so many years, that's providing housing for people who have very low income or moderate incomes. And that's something the federal government hasn't been doing a great job of, but at least the federal government's been involved in it. Today, 0 from the Trump administration on affordable housing, 0. So that's created a crisis. Now, I'm going to add the third problem on top of it, which is what I'll call middle housing. As you know, people who make $75,000 to $175,000 a year can't afford to buy a home anymore. That used to be where you could afford to buy a home. You can't anymore. You can't. It's unaffordable. And we have to address that problem because it's now the case that first-time home buyers, average age, 40 years old. Now, most of us have kids when we're 30s or 20s, and you want to be able to buy a house at some point early enough so you can raise your family in a house. If you earn enough, like 75 to 100, you ought to be able to do that. People can't do it anymore. So we've got to address that problem too. So the BUILD initiative has components of all three of that, but the biggest thing is we've got redlining that occurred many years ago that's still in existence in so many towns and counties. We've got to overcome those. Those are local restrictions on people building or acquiring a home. We've got to get rid of those. We've got to make it so that you can, an accessory dwelling unit, maybe you've got on your property an additional building that could be rental housing for somebody, but that community isn't allowing it. Why? Because they don't want, and I'm going to put air quotes around this, the wrong people to rent. And we've got to do away with those restrictions and those barriers. So that's an example of what we're trying to do in the state of Illinois. We also, you mentioned it, and maybe you were dismissing it, but I got to say, there are a lot of people, I bet people in this audience here today, who think about, they've got a job, they've maybe got enough money to make an investment, they'd like to invest in maybe a fourplex or a duplex, they'd like to rent it out. It's often the case that there are so many restrictions in a community that you can't even rent out a duplex or a fourplex in a community that you live in. And maybe it's a property you live in one of the four of the fourplex. We've got to do away with those restrictions. We need 225,000 new homes in the state of Illinois by 2030. 225,000. We can do probably half of that just by alleviating some of the restrictions. And the other half, in part, by incentivizing small developers. I'm not talking about the big names that you've heard, but just small developers in their own communities trying to do something to add some housing. We could take care of most of the problem if we just get rid of the barriers and the red tape.
Let me ask you about your partnership with your Lieutenant Governor Stratton, who just won the Democratic nomination. That alliance, you work together. Obviously, she's your Lieutenant Governor. You worked on some of these issues that we've talked about. Clean air, I know y'all worked on, and mortgage debt reduction. Tell me why you took the political risk of supporting and really pushing Stratton, who could possibly become the 6th, I think, woman of color to come out in this country as a member of the U.S. Senate.
I'm going to correct you just on one thing. It's hard to do that. It's sitting on stage with Reverend Al Sharpton to correct you, but I'm going to add to what you said, which is not only would she be the 6th black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. By the way, our state was the first to elect a first black woman to the United States Senate, Carol Moseley Braun. And now we're going to become the second black woman to elect, first state rather, to elect a second black woman to the United States. That's the first state ever. And 2 people of color, Tammy Duckworth, who's Asian American, is our other senator. So we're going to have 2 incredible senators. So that was not your question, but
All right.
I took
I stand corrected.
That's a political. I just took a big political risk by correcting you. I will tell you, first of all, she was the absolute best person for the job. That's it, period, end of sentence. I have worked with this woman now for 9 years. She was my chosen running mate in 2017, and she's amazing. I never wanted to speak after her at an event because she's so good, and she's so smart and accomplished. And we got to work together for these last 7 years, her as lieutenant governor, me as governor. And when she decided she wanted to run for United States Senate, there is no question in my mind that she would be the best person for the job. She has done so much. Example, she put forward a birth equity initiative in our state to address the fact that 3 times as many black women die from pregnancy-related conditions than white women. 3 times as many. And that's true across the country. But we needed to address it in the state of Illinois. She put that program together. She fought for it. And we are actually, I think this coming week, breaking ground on the first maternal center, a birthing center, on the south side of Chicago. And even more important than that, she initiated this program to invite more and more doulas and midwives who are black to get licensed and to be engaged in the process of birthing. So important that we have culturally sensitive, culturally knowledgeable medical leaders who are doing this kind of work. And so she's responsible for that. And that's just one of many initiatives of hers. She runs our Justice, Equity, and Inclusion endeavor for the state, which part of what she does is when we legalized cannabis in Illinois, we set aside a whole bunch of that money to address inequities that have plagued the black community over so many years. We call it the R3 program. She runs that and oversees that program, and it has put probably now over $100 million into black communities across the state of Illinois. So I'm very proud of Juliana. She's going to make you all proud too.
Since we are talking politics, the Democratic Party has the possibility of winning the midterms as far as the House of Representatives. As a shot at the U.S. Senate, what is your advice to the party as they now are challenging a narrow majority of the Republicans? What should they be doing more of, and what are they not doing enough of, in your judgment?
Well, I think there are at least 3 major topics here for the midterms, but I want to be clear about something right up front. You know, you hear a lot of people talking about fighting for democracy, which is so vitally important. We won't have a future for this country if we do not fight to preserve our democracy. So that's just a predicate to everything else. But you don't win elections talking to the public about democracy. There are obviously many of us who care deeply and understand what's going on and how they're undermining, how Donald Trump and the Republicans are undermining democracy. We need to be out there and doing everything we can to fight for it. But if you knock on 100 doors, and I've knocked on a lot of doors in my life, you knock on 100 doors and you talk to voters at the door and you say, what's the most important issue to you? 5 out of 100 will tell you democracy. They understand that it's an important predicate to everything, but what people are thinking about at the doors are, I can't pay my electric bill. I can't pay my rent. I can't afford to send my kid to community college or to college. I can't afford to retire. And these are all things that are affecting people's lives right now. So we need to be talking about that. And I know everybody uses this word affordability, but we need to talk about it in very plain language. It needs to be about lowering costs for people. And you know the best way to make things more affordable? Raise people's wages. And we ought to be, all of us, we should have done it in 2024. The people who are running in 2024, I'm running for re-election as governor in 2026. I can tell you, we need to raise the minimum wage in this country. $7.25 an hour, $14,000 a year on a full-time job. One person can't survive on that. 2 jobs, 2 full-time jobs at $7.25, one person could barely survive on that. You can't raise a family. You can't help your broader family. You can't afford anything really at $7.25. Why is our party not loud, I mean really loud, about raising the minimum wage? Juliana Stratton ran for her nomination to the United States Senate in part on raising the minimum wage to $25. We need to hear about raising the minimum wage over and over and over. And if you ask every Republican in Congress, all the ones we want to beat, if you ask every one of them, they will say they oppose raising the minimum wage. And about half of them will say they don't think we should have any minimum wage at all. And yet 80% of Americans want to see the minimum wage hiked. We should be for raising the minimum wage in the United States. That's one of many issues. A second I'll just give you is, democracy underlying it all. But a really important issue is they're taking away our voting rights. They're taking away your voting rights. And we have got to fight like hell to preserve those rights. So many people lost their lives doing it. Jesse Jackson, so proud to be from the state that Jesse Jackson called home. And I can tell you that we needed him now more than ever. The loss of Jesse Jackson is, frankly, it's almost hard to believe we're living in a world. My whole life, Jesse Jackson has been a beacon of fighting for voting rights and civil rights. And I must say, it is at this moment when all of us need to be civil rights activists. All of us. If we don't have a fair election in November, we won't have any more elections. Everybody has to show up, and you have to show up with purpose. And I don't care if Donald Trump, he's going to try to call out ICE and CBP and scare people away from the polls, everybody. He's going to make it seem like you shouldn't vote. We need to go with purpose and push them out of the way, or at least tell them to get out of the way, and go in and vote. And all of us as governors need to protect your right to vote.
As you talk about that, we have legislation that has led to redistricting around the country, which limits people of color in a very dramatic way in terms of representation. And the Supreme Court is sitting up holding its decision on Section 2 on whether to take race out of the Voting Rights Act. So in many ways, President Kennedy's grandson was here yesterday. In many ways, with Kennedy and Johnson established Civil Rights Act 64, Voting Rights Act 65, they're in front of our face in clear view, trying to upend everything that came out of the Civil Rights Movement and led to not only helping blacks and browns, but women and others. Do you think the party ought to be really bringing that down? Because this affects rural voters. Another son of your state, Barack Obama, passed the Affordable Care Act. That affected more people in red states and helped more farmers.
And their representatives are trying to take it away.
That's right. Do you think these are the kinds of things that the National Party ought to be more clearly bringing out and not letting, my fear is that they're letting Trump set the agenda and we're reacting to what he's talking about rather than acting on what people are concerned about?
I'm so glad you said that because, I mean, yeah, you know, you're right. So much of what's been happening is really a reaction to the everyday beating everybody over the head that Donald Trump has been doing every day. I'm sure you're feeling it. I remember 6 months into Joe Biden's term, I thought, wow, it's so quiet. Do you remember? Because it was so loud every day with Donald Trump, and now we're back in this mode again. Yes, there's a lot of reacting. We need to be proactive. Here's the one thing that we should take away and learn from what Donald Trump has done. He came into office with an agenda, and he essentially has invoked and gotten past almost all of his agenda in a year. We need to have our agenda, and we need to make sure we pass it in a first year of a Democratic administration. And it needs to be bold. And it needs to include the restoration of voting rights. I want to say proudly that my state has elected more black congressmen and women than any other state in the country. And it should be that we're bragging about a whole bunch of states competing for that. But when they take away voting rights, it makes it harder and harder and harder. But I'm telling you, in my state, we expanded voting rights. We already did that by state law. We made it easier for people to vote. We made it easier for you to vote by mail. You can now check a box when you vote and say, I want to vote by mail every time, and then you have the opportunity to get a ballot in the mail every single time, if that's what makes it easier for you to vote. We have drop boxes. We have tried to make it available to everybody. Voting is perhaps the most important thing that we've got to expand the rights of. But the agenda, and I'll call it Agenda 48, because the 48th president of the United States, who's going to be a Democrat, has got to have an agenda that's bold and gets passed right away.
The agenda is going to lead to a Democrat, you say, in the White House in 28. Are you going to be that Democrat?
So I feel like I'm on Price is Right. People are yelling out the answer, you know. Be bold, he says. First of all, I'm running for re-election as governor right now. Everybody from Illinois, can I count on your vote? All right, I love it. So let me tell you, vitally important to me. I've been involved in every presidential election, one fashion or another, probably since I was an adult and able to vote. I've been involved in some fashion or another. And I'm going to be more involved than ever before in 2028 because we can't lose. And have you looked at, first of all, I mean, we can all look at, the bar has been set real low by the guy in office today. The most corrupt president in my lifetime, and that's saying something because I was alive during Richard Nixon. So we have a pretty good bench. In fact, you've invited so many of them to come right here, and they've been on this stage, or they're going to be. So that's my answer. My answer is, I don't know what I'll be doing after. I hope I win re-election after, but I can tell you this: I'm going to fight like hell to elect a Democrat in 2028.
So that you're not ruling it out.
Reverend, whatever I decide to do, I really mean this. I start with what's going to be best for the people of the state of Illinois. That really is my number one, it's my starting point for everything, because I want to make sure that we're advancing the cause of particularly the most vulnerable, the working families of Illinois, the middle class in Illinois. That's who we are as Democrats. That's who I am as a Democrat. I mean, we're the party of the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act. We're the party of Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. We need to be fighting to preserve those things, but it was really all about centering on the people who need it most, and the people in my state need help.
Whoever is the candidate for the Democratic Party, including you, they will have to face the aftermath of Donald Trump. How do a candidate, whoever, deal with an opponent who will probably be one of his sycophants, either Rubio or Vance? How do we show a vision for the country rather than just going back and forth with brickbats with Trump and his sycophants.
Well, Trump isn't going to be on the ballot in 2028. I know he'd like to be, but he's not going to be on the ballot in 2028. He is not. So that is not who we're running against in 2028. I don't want you to overlook, though, that in 2026 we are battling Donald Trump, and we ought to be fighting him every single day, because every day he's in office, he's taking something away. And every day you let an authoritarian have their way is another day that we are losing power, the people of the United States. So, look, the way you deal with it is start with what is going to lift up the most vulnerable people in our country. What's going to lift up those who've been left out and left behind? What's